when you set the limit with these guys and they're having their angry response, because of course they don't want to stop, and then they start to become really verbally abusive as part of their anger response. I'm just wondering, again, I mean, you know, like according to theory, you know, maybe just let them have all those feelings and show that, you know, we can take that and we can tolerate that and they're still safe. But I always struggle with the line with, you know, how do you sort of impose that it's really not okay to talk like that, but at the same time wanting them to have their angry reaction. Do you know what I mean? So that's where I always get stuck too, and I just wonder if you could say anything about that.
I absolutely know what you mean. And when you're locked in that kind of that struggle, because that's the struggle of a social traditional parenting paradigm that says it's not okay to talk this way.
Right.
And a paradigm that says, but the kid has to express himself. And the reality is when in the moment when that child is stressed out and his amygdala is driving all his crazy prefrontal cortex behavior, he's not going to hear anything you have to say anyway about what's right and what's wrong.
Right. That's my gut feeling. Yeah.
The only impact you're going to have is in the midst of him expressing and being verbally, and we call it verbally abusive. I don't call it verbally abusive. I call it verbally expressive. In the moment of him being verbally expressive, when I'm not creating more threat and I'm not reacting to him, maybe if I look at him and I go, "Ouch, you're really bad," then see, I'm planting a seed of relationship.
Okay.
I'm planting a seed that says you don't have to go to this level with me. And we go back to attitudes, feelings, and behaviors. Right? The boys I deal with, primarily, they're stuck in behaviors. So if something doesn't go their way, if they set the limit and the limit's reinforced and they don't like the limit and then finally they get off, they're not going to cuss me out. They're going to kick a hole in the wall or run away or, you know, slam a door, you know, knock a hole in the door, knock the door off the hinges. They're going to go to behaviors. I want to get them to where they're verbally expressive because I'd rather the verbal expression than any of the behaviors.
Right. Well, I remember you said that in something that I took, so I've been, you know, just really going with it. But, you know, of course, the conflict, my own conflict is just like, you know, holy blank, how can they just, you know, talk like that? But I get that they're in this more primitive place and they just are emoting based on just all that fear.
And you know, another way I really like to look at that is they're a baby wailing and wailing and wailing about not having a need met.
Right, okay.
It just happens to be a baby in the body of a 15-year-old child or a 12-year-old child or an 18-year-old child.
Or
it's still a baby who's or a 9-year-old. It's still a wailing baby, and they're just wailing the best way they know how at their cognitive age and their chronological age.
Okay. So don't get hung up. In other words, like for me, I'm like I've stopped. I'm not commenting on the bad words and the disrespect and all that, and just instead be more of like, damn, you're really mad, or, you know, ouch, like you're saying. Just really align with the feelings and keep the relationship intact, and ultimately they will begin to calm down.
And they'll begin to calm down. Well, the calming down can in most instances be pretty quick. The other thing you want to do in some instances is you don't have to say anything. You just let them have this great big temper tantrum, and you stay present. You're just looking and listening and waiting. See, some kids, when you start validating too much, and this is a challenge. See, when our validation is not always authentic, our children are so sensitive to it, they sense as you don't really care, you're just making fun of me.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're validating, you have to make sure you're being authentic. If you can't, sometimes you don't want to say anything. And sometimes even if you're being authentic, you don't want to say anything because you just know it's not going to help. You know, that wailing baby who feels like they're not having their need met, sometimes they just need to know that there's an adult that's there with them.
Okay.
And they're not alone. But that's the best way when you think about that verbally abusive, verbally expressive child, the best way to approach that child is by not overwhelming them more.
Right. Well, that's what I noticed so clearly. I mean, that it doesn't work to try to get them to use any kind of self-control or logic because they're gone.
Because they're not in that part of their brain. They can't.
Right.
They literally cannot.
Right. And so that's just a really obvious lesson when you're in the midst of that. All that chatter, they're not hearing a thing. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.